Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Novels and Nightcaps, the podcast where we read, drink, and ramble. My name is Noor, joined as always by my co-host Gabe, and today we are taking off to the stars with one of my favorite graphic novels of all time, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. This is an 8-issue miniseries written by Tom King, with astonishing artwork by Bilquis Evely and vivid coloring by Matthew Lopez. And Woman of Tomorrow follows Supergirl on the eve of her 21st birthday. She's hopeless, she's destitute, she has no place in the galaxy, and we follow her as she joins a young girl on a vicious quest for revenge across the cosmos. It is an epic sci-fi fantasy masterpiece with beautiful artwork and an even more beautiful story about grief, loss, and resilience and moving forward despite it all. And for those of you who don't know, this is also the inspiration behind the DCU's Supergirl movie that is about to come out. As always, we will give our spoiler-free thoughts on the book for the first 15 minutes or so before we dive deep into spoilers for the remainder of the episode. But before we get started, Gabe, what are you drinking?
You didn't tell me that this is one of your favorite comic books of all time. Well, today I'm drinking a sort of bastardized Manhattan. You see, I just read the word vermouth in the recipe and went, "Oh, I have vermouth. I have dry vermouth, which is not the same thing at all as sweet vermouth. And so I have a rye and dry vermouth Manhattan. I also threw a fat ice cube in there because I really like my drink to be nice and icy cold, and I don't really care very much about the drink diluting. So I made it how I wanted to make it. So let's give it a taste. I haven't actually tasted it yet, so let's see. It's delightful. It's a lot more spirit forward than I think a traditional Manhattan would be because of the dry vermouth compared to the sweet vermouth, but it's exquisite. And the reason I chose it, besides I think you can kind of see the color, I don't know. I'm also very colorblind, so I can only barely go by the color of things. I wanted something though that felt kind of angry, sort of vengeful, as well as a little lonely. And to me, that's kind of what the Manhattan inhabits as a cocktail. And so that's really what I decided to go with. And I am so excited about this. Noor has kept me waiting for a while now because he really hyped up his cocktail. And so now, Noor, you have to tell me, you have to show me, what on earth are you drinking today?
I splurged a little for one of my favorite books, my favorite graphic novels of all time. I don't exactly know what to call this, but it has Malibu, so coconut rum, has blue curacao, and it has a little bit of grenadine. And it's really hard to tell, but it is a nice shade of purple and pink. And if I look from a bird's eye view, you can see the streaks of blue and red forming waves across the drink. And it is beautiful and it tastes amazing. I've had it before and I'm having it again because it's so sweet and so cosmic and so colorful, just like this book.
Wow, we really went with completely opposite vibes in how we were trying to capture our feelings on the book. And I think that's fair to say. I didn't know that this was one of your favorite comic books of all time. I'm happy I read it, but also I think that my experience may have been slightly more tame than yours was. But that's always a good thing on a podcast. Whenever the co-hosts disagree, that's when you get some of the best conversations. And let's be honest, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. So I would love to talk about this. Noor, can you give me some of your initial impressions on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which I gotta say, absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous graphic novel. The illustrations are top notch. So if you want to start us off there and just kind of lightly give a little tease about what is going on here, what did you like? What did you maybe dislike in a spoiler-free sort of realm? And who would you recommend this book to?
Yeah, so I'll start by recommending this to anyone who likes Tom King as a writer. If you like Tom King, you're going to love this book. If you hate Tom King, which I think a lot of people do, actually, you are not going to like this book. And based on what I'm seeing here for your ratings, which is a little disheartening, I don't think you're a fan of Tom King, which is perfectly
guess
fine.
not.
I think it's a valid argument. You know, he's either a hit or miss, I think. Personally, everything I've read so far by him has been pretty awesome. But, staying with Supergirl here, the artwork is phenomenal. This is one of the most beautiful graphic novels that I've ever seen. It has some panels that I wish I could frame. I wish I could have them on posters all over my room. It's beautiful. And when I learned that the DCU was adapting the storyline into a movie, I got really excited. And I am very excited to see where the movie goes, even though the trailer feels very different from
Yeah,
the novel. It doesn't feel the same tonally, which could be for the
not at all.
better or it could be for the worse. We're about to find out
Yeah,
in
I
a
think it's
couple
for the
weeks.
better.
I think it's for the
I gotta
worse,
say,
but we'll see.
yeah, it does feel very different. I was expecting the trailer, and that's not at all what this experience is. It feels like, now, to be completely fair here, I am not super well read whenever it comes to comic books. And so I kind of read this and thought, yeah, like I got it. It's a superhero story with a few elements here or there that really bugged me, kind of got under my skin. Other elements that I thought just didn't land super well for me, but then also the art alone 100% makes it worth it. I will, without a doubt, say, I don't care who you are, this is just pretty to look through. Even if you don't want to read the words, maybe that's a little rude. You should probably read the words. But just looking at it, the color palette is gorgeous. And I was constantly just staring at the page, dissecting what was going on because of the layering and the composition was immaculate. So I 100% think that there are frames that will stick with me, but what will not is the writing for me. I had some serious problems with it stylistically and character-wise and plot-wise, and it just didn't land, I think, fundamentally for me. Um, but I could see how it could for others. So just to give credit where credit's due, I can see how this would be good for some people. It just wasn't for me.
You're wrong. No,
Okay, okay.
I think it's completely valid. I think that, I didn't vibe with Red Rising at all,
Yeah,
and I think it's okay. I see the merit. I see why people would like it. It was not for me, and obviously there are going to be stories that you feel the same way. And I think, like you said, this is why it is good to have a co-host, and it is good to not always agree because we're always kind of repeating what the other person says. So
not
this will be
today.
a good episode, I think.
Not today, baby. I think that if you
But
just would have stopped it after the first issue, it would have been so good. There's just one issue. You had just the opening scene and you ended it there, then it would have been golden. Because I think that the very first scene that we really get kind of captures the vibe that possibly the DCEU is going for. But, or is it DCU? Whatever. You understand.
the
The
DCU.
Supergirl, okay, DCU. The Supergirl film that is coming out, it seems like it took that first scene where, I guess I don't know. I don't want to go into spoilers here. We're going into spoilers, baby. You'll know if you like it. If you like superheroes and you like comics, go read it. Why not? It's pretty and it has a half decent story at least.
Before
You
we
should do
go
that.
into spoilers, I think this is an excellent entry point for Supergirl, and it redefined the character. If you grew up watching like the CW show, that is not Supergirl. That's just Superman as a girl, which is not Supergirl. You would think that's what it is, but that's not what the character is. And this book embodies the character better. So if you're
You're
interested
totally
in
right.
that, check it out. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into spoilers.
Yeah, because one of the defining differences is that Supergirl swears a little bit. She gets a little, a little vulgar action up in here. Except it's all, oh my gosh, it really bothered me that it censored all of the all of the swearing. I don't know why. It's just I'm not used to seeing that in books and that kind of thing anymore, and so it was very visually jarring to see like very mature themes, really grotesque things happening. Like you visually watch some intense scenes, yet they're not allowed to say like any bad words. That to me took me out a little bit, but I think that's just a characteristic of comic books in general, not necessarily a Supergirl thing. Because for reference, for those who don't know, the pretty much besides like the Killing Joke and some Infinity War stuff, And finally, Watchmen, which is a masterpiece. That's like my experience with comics. And so I'm quite new. I obviously know a lot about superheroes because I am Gen Z and grew up in the age of Marvel, but I'm not super well versed in the actual comics. So yeah, Nora, can you tell me a little bit more about this whole censoring thing?
I don't know.
Okay, cool, awesome.
It's honestly, I didn't think much about it. It didn't bother me a lot. I think it's a stylistic choice because I've read some of his other work and there's definitely like cuss words that are not censored. I couldn't tell you. I think it was just for the humor of it all. And honestly, I don't know. Here's my first kind of not hot take or anything like that,
Okay,
but I guess I'm trying to defend it.
yeah, go for it.
I don't think it's fair to say that the only difference between Supergirl and Superman is that Supergirl cusses. All right,
Yeah, no,
there's a whole lot more to that. But I know for a fact there are so many people out there who are gonna read this book, and that's gonna be their only takeaway. And it's people like you why we don't have any more well-defined female characters in the comic book
You're saying
industry.
I'm sexist. You're concluding
Yes,
because I
I'm
didn't
calling
like
it
Supergirl, because I didn't like Supergirl. I'm super sexist. No, listen, no, I don't actually think that the only difference between them is that Supergirl cusses a little bit. There's obviously a fundamental kind of depressive loneliness that you get with Supergirl that I don't think, and this is me judging from just kind of cultural zeitgeist as well as the films, that's not necessarily the storyline that you typically get with Superman. She feels so lonely. But that's what makes like Comet the horse feel so weird and so out of place. Okay, if we're going to talk about spoilers, I need to mention this. So, let's start with characters because that's what we're talking about here. I give characters a 5 out of 10. And it's not because of Supergirl. Supergirl I thought was fine. I had no problem with her as a character. I thought she was interesting. I thought that she was pretty well developed. It was the other people that Comet. What's going on with Comet? Comet just appears and then suddenly dies, and it's like, I'm a man. I'm like, I don't care. I have no idea who you are, and I don't know what's going on. And so it just didn't make sense. And I thought that one of my biggest problems with the character wise is I was super annoyed by the other main character's voice, by the other protagonist, the narrator of the whole thing. I just hated the way that she spoke. It made me so angry. Like, I was really annoyed reading the narration style, not necessarily her as a person. And I understand it's going for something that's supposed to feel alien and a bit obtuse compared to something on Earth, right? It's supposed to feel different, but it also made it less fluid, and it really stunted my emotional connection to the characters in the story, particularly because the style, which at times I think was going in the direction of trying to seem quirky a little bit to try and make the main girl feel quirky, but it just didn't work for me. It just came across as frustrating to read. And that really made it hard to connect with her character. That, and she kind of explained the entire character arc that she was going through in the narration, which really frustrated me. It was going for something really good. This is a bit of plot, but it was going for something really good whenever she, is she gonna kill him? Is she not? And then she basically, the narrator, just goes and says, no, Supergirl has been teaching me this lesson all along. Let me talk you through all of the steps that make this story work. And I'm like, dude, that completely ruined the moment. It completely ruined the character for me because you just told me what I'm supposed to feel, and it doesn't work like that. You can give me, like, trust me as a reader. Okay, sorry. I'm an adult. Take a step back. How did you feel about the characters, Nora?
I love the characters, but
Yeah, I'm sure you
and
did.
we're kind of we're leaning into style here a little bit, and
Yeah.
and that's the only reason why I didn't give this a 10 out of 10 is what you said, the narration. I agree with you. It's a lot. It's overly wordy, and it uses a lot of fancy words that maybe you don't really need to use. Also, one thing that did bother me about reading this is that Ruthie uses the word August a lot, and August is a word that is very Earth coded for obvious reasons. The month of August, among some other things. That part did kind of get to me. The word choices were a little funky, and it did slow me down at times, especially the first time I read it. I've read this book twice now. The first time I read it was last year, and then I started reading it again for this episode. It definitely slowed me down the first time. So yeah, that is a big con for this book. The narration can get in the way. It didn't stop me from emotionally connecting with the characters, and I still think the way it explores, not necessarily Ruthie, but the way it explores Supergirl, I thought was done phenomenally well. And I think it really shows like those small moments of resilience in a world that is very chaotic, or I guess a universe that's very chaotic and indifferent at times. And it is not particularly as just as it could be. And I think it embodies the character of Supergirl really well. As for Ruthie, yeah, she is not as developed as she could be, especially near the end. And I do agree that, that emotional climax, she definitely, that one page where they go over all the little moments that, helped Ruthie learn her lesson. I do think that part would have benefited without the words. Like, just the pictures would have been perfect.
Ooh, yeah, that would have been interesting. I would have liked that. It made it feel a little bit more like a CW show in that moment. But
And I will
I
say,
understand.
from everything that I know about Tom King, and I don't know him personally, but I hear the talk online. People really don't like him. Like his personality, he definitely thinks, from what I hear, people definitely think that he thinks he's smarter than he actually is. And so I think you can
Allegedly.
see, yeah, you can see some of that in here, I think. Like, it is a bit of a con, I think.
To give character stuff credit though, I will give one specific scene I absolutely loved, like without a doubt, absolutely loved. And in general, it was a whole sequence. Well, at the time when I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is dragging on a little bit long. In retrospect, it really stuck with me. The entire part of, I guess I don't know which issue it was, but the entire section where they're having to travel slowly through space because Krem stole their ship, and so they're like on the equivalent of just an airplane, and you have these just little interactions between the person in the middle seat, the different aliens that you're interacting with. But Supergirl, in those small moments, the sort of intimate environment where her powers don't really mean much and there's not a whole lot of action actually going on, that's whenever, to me, I felt the most emotional connection to the character. And it's particularly when you have this one alien pointing his gun at Supergirl, and she like decks him. And then they go and clean up in the bathroom together. And that was incredibly emotional. And you could feel just this blockade with Supergirl that she didn't necessarily want to keep up, but kind of felt like she had to in order to survive. She's putting up these personal walls so that she doesn't connect to people. But of course, in the end, there's still this, I wouldn't say this plot, but there was this deep longing, this deep connection, this deep responsibility that Supergirl held this entire time towards Ruthie, faking the fact that her dog actually didn't need an antidote. Like, that's endearing. That's endearing. So I would 100% agree that Supergirl's character was good. I think the problem for me is it's not redefining a character. This is just the character I got. I don't know Supergirl. I'm unfamiliar with her. So to me, this isn't redefining it. I'm just like, oh, yeah, nice. A well-made character. Good. The one in the story. That's awesome. Good for. Okay, no, but you have to. Can you please explain the horse? What's going on with Comet? Who is this horse? And why was I supposed to feel something when he died?
Dude, I don't know who Comet
Okay.
is. I just know that the DC universe is full of whimsy and wonder, and if a character shows up, I assume they've been there before. I know this exists as part of the greater whole, and I imagine this is how some people feel when they watch an MCU movie without having seen the other ones.
Yeah.
I think this is just a problem with the genre as a whole. Who Comet was did not matter to me at all either. But the moment where he is flying across the cosmos, outrunning that big ball of magic to the end of the universe, where it's all black and white and there's nothing there. And
That was
Supergirl
cool.
pops a bubble because, magic doesn't necessarily work here the way it does over there. That was awesome. And
It was cool. It was
it
really
has
cool.
those
I would
moments.
say, yeah.
So I
And
can forgive some
visually,
of the more pressing questions for you, like who is Comet?
who cares about who Comet is and
Who
why he's a man? It was just like, and then he's like has all this crazy power, and then all of a sudden he gets shot with the kryptonite bullet, and is like, I'm a man now. I, I think honestly that entire sequence, I'm not joking, was partly ruined because of that. Because I thought it was funny. I laughed when I was like, "Who is this beautiful guy? I don't. Why is he sacrificing himself? Is he's just a good horse? I guess I don't know, but I yeah I don't know.
Yeah,
Character
no,
wise,
I couldn't tell you who Comet is.
okay, and he was there for like a good chunk of the story. It wasn't like a small matter, but I 100% agree. The moment where the page just goes black and white as she goes to outside the universe, I was didn't really know what was going on fully, but it was really cool, and I was really into it. And that mostly has to do with style, which I want to talk about next, because I know my score looks low, and I want to be clear. The only reason it's not below a 5 is because the art is insane. To be very clear, I did not like much of the writing that was on the page. I really didn't. It was at times insufferable. But the actual, like, I don't know if I can look, just this is so cool. It just goes black and white for one page. It's so cool. And then this scene where the space fades away was insane. Who did the art again? Oh, who was it? Who
Vilkis, I
was the
believe.
artist? Yeah. I want to read more of what they've done, because this alone sold them as an artist. I want to see more, because this is a masterpiece whenever it comes to art. It's just a shame that they had to work with Tom King. So I don't know Tom King, but no. Personal jabs aside, I don't actually know who he is. Who knows? He could be a swell guy for all I know. I just didn't connect to this story very much. But what'd you give style, and what was your takeaway from it?
Yeah, Tom King is one of the most controversial writers currently working. And, I'm sure you can see why. For style, though, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I do think the writing is the weakest part, but the artwork is so beautiful that it makes up for almost any shortcomings. It's almost as if the artwork is the story and Tom King is the passenger. So for me, the writing, yeah, it bogged it down in many ways. It is, I will say, it's not as atrocious as Red Rising. So that's my hot take. But the artwork is so beautiful. Not just the obviously astonishing pieces, especially the one page, like almost solo artwork, which are like multiple panels at once, but it's really just one big picture that bleeds into the other. I don't have my book with me, but there's a couple of those, and it's beautiful. There's the one where she turns into the dragon when she takes the kryptonite pill. There's the black and white picture. There's the one where Krypton explodes. There's the one with the horse. There are so many, and it's beautiful.
This is probably my
But
favorite, where they're just waiting at the train station.
that's the cover.
That's not the cover. This is the cover.
No, it's a cover. It's the cover for one of the issues.
Oh, that was also really confusing. I didn't know, because I was reading obviously in one big book, and so
Yeah, me too.
like the chapter titles of where chapters would begin are sometimes on the covers and then sometimes on like random panels, and it was really confusing to figure out like actually what was the beginning of a new issue. I'm also just a little stupid, so that might be part of it. But
Yeah, those full pages that were followed by another page for like the sun. Those were the covers for the issues, like the individual issues that were coming up. Yeah, yeah.
okay, well, that was a great cover, best cover.
My favorite cover is the one where she's sitting on the beach with the sword bleeding, or covered in blood.
That one
I
actually is
think
really sick.
that one embodies the character really well, especially the whole, resilience and just the trauma that she has experienced her whole life. But as
Yeah.
I was saying, the artwork embodies the big scale, but it's also so intimate. There's so many moments where Ruthie is really bold and brass and asks a deeply personal question without thinking about it. And Supergirl just like stares into the distance. And I could, at least personally, I could feel the pain. And to be able to do that on a page, on a drawing, on a piece of, it's art, but on a piece of drawing, that was, that was incredible. And it just reminded me of why I really love comic books and why it's a medium that is very underrated and underrepresented, and we need more of that. That was
Mm.
awesome. So yeah, the artwork, I think, for me, just elevated the experience
Yes,
like tenfold.
I completely agree. The artwork not only elevated the experience, but carried it.
Yeah,
Full
like
stop.
you could argue it is the experience. Like it's
Yeah, I
phenomenal.
100%. Like the moments that my jaw dropped were only because of the art. Just to be frank, like the moment where Supergirl rides Comet to the edge of the universe. I would honestly say that the moment itself was not particularly inspired, in that it wasn't like there was foreshadowing to like this is a solution. It wasn't like mind blowing in the sense of, oh, Supergirl thought it through. It's, brute force. I don't know. It just wasn't particularly satisfying in the plot realm, but visually it was indescribable visually. And so that's where like the plot also really struggled with me. I wasn't a huge fan of it. There were some key moments that I really liked, but I think it lacked, at least in my opinion, an artistic cohesion that I've seen in other stories. I got what it was going for. You're going to these different planets, you're interacting with these different groups. I was just wanting more of a cohesive story within that. And maybe that's just the fact that it is individual issues that are stapled together into one big book. And so I'm reading it as a story rather than an issue. So possibly that paints my experience of it. But like the purple situation, the purple town, that whole thing, I immediately knew what was going on. It's like, okay, duh. Like, that's what's going on. And I was interested. I was very much interested in the individual plot of, like, I want to see what happened to these people actually. I want to discover how she's going to respond to this, like, what's going on. But it seems so self contained that it didn't connect well to the rest of the narrative in a satisfying way. But I liked what was going on there. I just wanted it to be more whole. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? Well, I do know my thoughts, but what are your thoughts?
I mean, the 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 thing with, at least in my experience, the thing with the comic books and graphic novels that I've read, they're more about episodes in a life or episodes in a season of a character rather than, a plot line. And it is definitely one of the drawbacks of the genre, the superhero genre in particular, because the superhero always comes up with the solution. And oftentimes they come up with the solution off screen. So yeah, it's a big drawback. But I think the book is more concerned with like the intimate moments between Ruthie and Supergirl and their whole experience as they kind of come face to face with the fact that the world, or in this case, the universe, is a very morally gray and chaotic place. And it's more focused, I think, especially that the Purple Town episode. I think the way I read it was as a sort of like an eye opener for Ruthie. That it's like what she says at the end. We're so it's way too big and we're too small. And Supergirl doesn't offer a solution. She doesn't offer hope the way Superman does. If this was a Superman comic, Superman would have given the most beautiful speech about how hope carries us forward and dreams lift us. And that's awesome. I love that character and I love those ideas. With Supergirl, it's more of the acknowledgement and less about the naivety, which I don't think Superman is as naive as we easily label him to be. But in this case, it's more about the acceptance of, the world is very chaotic. There's death, there's a lot of injustice, a lot of racism, a lot of all sorts of issues here. But the first step we can take is to just be there for the person besides us. And I think that moment captured that idea perfectly. And you see that throughout the book in these very standalone episodes. And I will admit that the first time I read it, I was also confused about. I guess you weren't confused, but I was confused about the pacing, and it definitely lacked the coherence. Reading it a second time through a different lens, seeing them as episodes and focusing on the small moments of kindness and resilience, I thought it was beautiful the way she helps her neighbors, uh, by building all the graves and finding the grave digger's daughter's body. Being there for Ruthie, teaching her how to wash her hands. I thought those moments were amazing, and for me, that's why I gave plot an 8 out of 10. I guess it wasn't as traditional of a story as it could have been. And in that sense, there are definitely a lot of, drawbacks and issues with it. And I do have my issues with the story, but the way it sort of captures those moments of resilience in the seemingly indifferent universe, I think that is like her way of giving hope. But, I completely also accept what you're saying as completely valid. Those are valid criticisms, for sure.
No, it does make me think about the like framing it in that context. I think does wonders for the story, especially whenever you consider like one of the final things that Supergirl kind of says in the comic, which is whenever she's talking to Ruthie about her book that she wrote, which is, the book we're reading basically. And she thanks her for letting her take the burden of the vengeance. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense of how that distinguishes Supergirl from Superman is particularly not the hope element, but the burden element, I think is more emphasized with Supergirl. You have Supergirl who's wanting to take on the burden of sacrifice. Is much more of a Christ-like figure, I think, honestly, than Superman is, which is, I don't know, maybe that's a hot take, but
No,
obviously
no,
Superman
I think so too.
is designed to be a Christ-like figure. That's kind of his whole thing. He's all powerful, yet he takes on the burden of it all. But no, Supergirl is designed to be the one to bear it all. She's designed to be the one who feels that pain, who is, still trying to shove those was it lead stakes into the ground of like the Krypton piece as it's floating through space, and everybody's probably gonna die. And then she's still the one who builds the coffins. Like she's carrying that burden and has accepted the role of carrying that burden. And yeah, that to me screams a lot more of that sort of like Christ-like sacrifice compared to Superman. Because I think Superman, while I agree, yeah, he is not as naive as we like to paint him out to be. He has this fundamental belief in goodness, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Yet it's also undeniable that there is evil, and there is darkness, and there is bad things, and bad things do happen that you cannot fix. And yet still the right thing to do is help others, right? Despite that, despite the darkness, we can still recognize when somebody is doing a kind act, when somebody is being a hero. That's clear. I think they're mercenaries. The mercenaries in here that are trying to save Krem are not the good guys. They're obviously the
They're
bad guys.
they're horrible.
Whichever way you look at it, they're bad guys, right? Whereas you look at Supergirl, and whichever way you look at it, she's a good guy. And that says something. That has to mean something. So maybe that's where Supergirl and Superman kind of meet in the middle, is that this has to mean something. There has to be meaning here. There has to be a point to this. But yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way. Emphasizing the burden angle is an excellent way to analyze her character. And 100% that is shown well throughout the text. I still do hate how it's not narratively cohesive, because I think that Watchmen proved that it's possible, but also that is masterpiece. So I understand that's not the norm.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have started you off with the best comic book of all time.
Yeah, maybe that wasn't.
But my bad. No, but I agree with you. The writing is absolutely the weakest part. I think Tom King has some really interesting ideas,
I agree.
and I think they are explored way better off in the artwork than it is in the writing.
You mentioned earlier that you thought that the trailer, at least for the film Supergirl, was going in a different direction from the book. I agree with you. I would just like you to maybe expand on that a bit more. What in particular from the trailer signaled a diversion, which, to be clear to everyone listening, we're going to go watch the movie and we're going to report back. Don't worry. We read the comic. We're going to watch the movie. We're probably going to make a video about it. So come back to see that if you find our takes interesting here. So what did you think?
Yeah, so it looks different. It's the trailer makes the movie look tonally different from the book, and I think in some ways that is a really good thing, and in some ways it might be a disservice to the story. But only only time will tell. I am very excited to see the movie, and I think it captures some very interesting aspects of this novel, and it's gonna amplify them. And I do like the way it is sort of framing Supergirl, at least in the movie and in the larger DCU. Specifically, the visuals don't look as colorful as the artwork. To be fair, the artwork is phenomenal. And so I don't really know how you can live up to that. But I do think it's not like the color grading looks a little bit dull, in my opinion. I think it could be more colorful. It also looks very focused on the sci-fi aspects of the aesthetic, whereas in the comic book, in the graphic novel, it's more sci-fi fantasy. You have
Very fantasy,
pirates,
yeah.
and it's beautiful. It's awesome, and it doesn't feel that way here in the trailer. Krem looks like your average. He looks like a Ravager, which the Brigands are kind of the Ravagers, but at the same
Yeah.
time, he looks like the Ravagers from the movie rather than like a space pirate as he does in the book. And I do think the movie will have a more optimistic outlook on everything. I definitely think that Supergirl, it's going to focus more on Supergirl. And I do think the dog is going to be hurt. And so that's going to be like a real stake in the movie. I get the feeling that that's what's going to happen, that the dog will actually be hurt. And there is that like sort of time crunch
Mm.
because I
I hope
don't
it's not the
think
case.
I hope it's not, but it seems to me, based on the trailer, that Supergirl is still sort of in that immature stage or that early stage of her life. Whereas in this one, she is still, immature in some ways, but she is more kind of rugged and world weary. Whereas in the movie, she looks a bit more young and careless, even though, in the book, she's also 21.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. No, I would say I really, really, really do believe that that first scene where Supergirl just turned 21 and she's having a drink and she's wearing that brown coat, they're taking that Supergirl and it seems to me like they're running with that. Like that is sort of the character extended because definitely the Supergirl that we see in that scene is not necessarily the same sort of character we get for the rest of the comic. Because she's like a lot funnier, a lot more jokey, a lot more obviously because she's drunk, so it makes sense. But you lose that throughout the rest of the book. The rest of the comic, she's quite what would be the right word here? She's quite stoic, I would say is probably the term. Until she's not, and she goes, she goes crazy and starts destroying a bunch of people. But for the most
cusses a
part,
little bit.
yeah, whenever she cusses a little bit, shows off her quirkiness. No, but yeah. But during this first scene, she captures exactly what you see on screen in the trailer. And so it feels like they read this first page and then was like, that's sick, let's do that. So I do wonder though, how are they gonna handle this sort of episodic tone? I feel like they're just gonna cut most of it and redo it. That's my suspicion. I can't fathom them doing this whole Purple Town thing. Well, maybe they would do that. I feel like that would translate pretty well actually on screen. But the rest of it, I'm not like the dinosaur. I don't know because I don't know. It doesn't work to me. It doesn't work.
See,
But
I think that the dinosaur episode would be a really good emotional arc in the movie, like bleeding into the third act, and I think it could be done really well. I think it can be done significantly better than the novel. But I agree with you. I think they're going to cut a lot of things. I also think they are a lot more focused on the whole, finding your place in the galaxy kind of story beat, which is not what this story is about. But I think for the DCU, it actually will be a better sort of angle to explore. But we'll see. I am interested. I have my worries, but I don't think I don't think this movie will be a disaster. I think it's gonna be a
No,
fun time. I'm
I
worried
hope
that it's not
so.
gonna be as awesome as I want it to be, but that has to do with my expectations, I think,
Okay, we
which is
got it. We were
perfectly fine.
basically talking about it now a little bit. World was my best score. I loved the world. I very much enjoyed it. I did have some problems just because of the. I mean, the this seems more like a comicism than anything that I'm criticizing, but the relationship between magic and science and the superpowers and just the logic of it all, there's not really much logic. And I'm all for whimsy, but I like whimsy with some direction. And at times it felt like I lost a little bit of direction. And again, I think part of this is my brain isn't fully just immersed into this sort of environment and into this world. And I loved the pirates. I'm all for pirates. But the area that really lost me is just the culture and the world, particularly how it pertains to what's her name? Ruthie. I wasn't a huge fan of her culture, at least how it kind of came across. Okay,
You're
wait. To
you're
be
you're
clear,
a xenophobe.
no,
You're a
no, no,
xenophobe.
no, 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 no. It wasn't as cool. I did not I wasn't very attached to her culture, and I wish it was a bit more distinct. At least on her end, I got that there was a sword and that her family had a farm, but I just wanted a bit more clarity regarding like where she was from and how that worked. But I vibed with the visuals. I vibed with the kind of tone. Does that make sense? I give it a 7 out of 10. I very much liked it. I very, very much liked it. Uh, it just, it felt a little too big for me to consider. A little bit too broad, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. Felt like a lot of huge brushstrokes rather than a lot of fine details.
I don't know. I don't know how to respond. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. Like me personally, I really liked it. It gave me the whole, fairy tale like style and aesthetic to it. It felt like a legend rather than like a story. And part of it has to do with the fact that, a whole lifetime has passed since she's kind of lived the story. Uh, but for me, that worked. That made the story feel more timeless. It felt more legendary and more mythical, and I think that worked in my favor or for my favor. And she also describes a lot of her culture throughout the book, and like a lot of like legendary battles and like
Yeah, but it's like
a lot
meaningless.
of
Like it doesn't,
saves.
it's not tied to anything. It's not like the only tied part we get is the beginning moment where her dad gets killed, and that's a epic scene. And then we get a little bit with her mom, right? Like a little bit with her family. I just didn't know what. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like it's a very cheap trick. It's a very cheap writer's trick to just start listing battles that mean nothing. Like that's very cheap. Whereas we got some
That's
excellent world building with a lot of these worlds, like Purple Town, the world building was incredible. This sort of purgatory
Germany.
between this sort of purgatory between spaces, which this airliner in a sense, incredible world building. That was rich in detail and flavor. Like it painted
Yeah,
such a specific vibe. I just wish I got that with her world.
I hear you, but also her world is such a like minimal part of the story that I don't think it's valid to like have it weigh as
It's where she's
much
from. That's her like whole thing.
because
That's her personality.
but the whole point is that, like emotional resilience and hardship and trauma, all of those things are universal. And I think that's where, like I don't need to know the culture specifically. The thing that, at least the thing that strikes me the most is that, all these feelings are feelings that I can relate to, nevertheless,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of where she's from. And it's like the whole universe suffers from these problems. And I think for me, that matters most. But I will say, as far as world goes, I give it an 8.5 because I think everything else was phenomenal. I love the aesthetic of every single planet we visited. Purple Town was awesome. The pirates were awesome. That tropical beach coastal planet that we see at the end was also beautiful. the opening panel and the final panel that both parallel each other and show her father dying, and then her bonking Krem and not forgiving him, which is completely valid. And I think it's a point that contemporary media often overlooks. It's the fact that, you can change. People can change. People can repent, and that's amazing for them. But forgiveness is not something that you owe someone. And I think that was a beautiful, or not beautiful necessarily, but I thought that was a really refreshing conclusion that,
You know,
after all is said and done, she doesn't have to forgive him. She doesn't. And Krem
yeah.
does redeem himself, which I think
You,
is awesome.
I caught on to the fact that they're both like silhouettes and they're mirroring each other that way. I didn't catch on to the fact that the first page is the sun setting and the last page is the sun rising. That's freaking cool. That's really, really
Yeah.
sick. I really dig that. Especially just like flipping between the two here.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. It's really cool. I think that that's also my problem though with the fact that like it follows a little bit of hero's journey elements, right? Not all of it, 100% not all of it. But Ruthie does leave the nest, right? She leaves her home that we know nothing about. And then she does come back home and we still know nothing about really her home. And so I think that's why it mattered to me is it's like, I don't know what she's losing by leaving. I don't know what she's really leaving behind other than, I mean, her family. Yeah, but we really don't know much about them either. But granted, I will also fully admit you have a lot less space to tell your story in a comic. You have maybe a few panels to get a certain point across, if that, right? So I do understand you can't spend a lot of time just prancing around trying to build out your home. Like you just don't have the space for it.
That is completely valid. And I completely, acknowledge that. I also think like she's not really leaving anything behind because her father was her whole world and her father died. And she even brings it up multiple points. And she always reminds us, and that is one of my nitpicks, that she's always reminding us of how awesome her father was, which kind of annoyed me. But that's the way I took it. Both Ruthie and Supergirl are characters that are homeless. They are leaving nothing behind because there's nothing to leave behind.
Then why does she go back home? Why? That's like, if she left nothing behind, why doesn't she just go travel to?
Such a weird thing to be fixated on.
It really bothered me. I really hated it. I was like, why does she care so much about this place? She's this old woman living in the same, like, I don't know.
Well, she didn't leave home she didn't leave home to go to a better world. She left home to
for
kill
revenge.
This guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she's like, I guess I figured it out. Let me go back home. All done. All done. Even though I don't care about none of that home. My father's dead. That's all done. I don't care about my family.
You don't need to care about the home. It's irrelevant to the story.
It was bothering me so much. I really hated it. I was just like, you spend the book. No, but the book did such a good job of characterizing these other places. That's the problem, is it did such a good job of characterizing every other place but the foundational home that is the first and last page of the book. How did it not characterize it with any sort of visual cue besides like setting sun or rising sun?
I also think this is a book written for the people of the world. And so you're writing a travelogue talking about all these other beautiful places you've seen. And you do allude to like all these battles and sayings and lifestyle on the farm. So she definitely does describe her home and her life growing up multiple times throughout the horrible narration that you couldn't get through.
Clearly didn't stick.
So they definitely do that, but
so bad. That does make sense though. It is. I will fully admit you're right. It is a travelogue. Why would she describe her home on a travelogue? That's not how travelogues work. You usually document the traveling. You got me there, Nora. I concede. Her home doesn't matter. It's just the last and first page of the book, whatever. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's World. We have to go over Impact. Impact 5 out of 10. It was fine. I felt stuff, I guess. I was like,
I hate you so much.
I listen, I was like, wow, that's cool. Okay. Nothing really shocked me. Nothing really floored me. I thought it was cool. I'm very neutral. I wasn't upset about the impact of the book. I wasn't like, gravely disappointed. I didn't have strong expectations going into this. And so I was just kind of along for the ride, and the ride didn't blow me away or disappoint me. It was fine. It was good. I enjoyed it. What did you feel?
It's fine. You're wrong, but that's fine.
You're not, you cannot invalidate my feelings, all right?
No, that's completely fair. Honestly, that's completely fair. And I'm afraid that I also overhyped it a little bit too much, but that's fine.
No, I looking at your score, you clearly hyped it just as much as you felt about it. You love it. It's okay. You're allowed to like stuff. Impact wise though, I will give most impactful moment. Okay, besides Supergirl teaching Ruthie how to wash her hands, that was incredibly impactful. Probably the most intimate scene in the whole thing. I did think the section where they did go over Supergirl's actual backstory of her on Krypton, essentially like the process there, I did find that impactful. That's all I can really give it. Go ahead, your turn.
See, all right, no, that's completely valid. And that's the nicest way I can say
it's your psychology
I disagree
degree
with you.
coming into play. You're like,
it's the nicest way I can say. It's the nicest way I can keep us monetized.
We're not monetized.
No, not at all. Yeah. But one day we will be.
Yeah, one day we'll be so monetized. This video, one day will be monetized.
No, but impact for me, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. It is by no means Watchmen. Watchmen is amazing. It is not one of my favorite stories of all time, but it is one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. I think, honestly, this is the first graphic novel that I picked up after a long time not reading graphic novels or, superhero comics in general. So reading this got me back into it. It reminded me of why I love the genre and why I love the medium so much. The small moments of kindness and resilience that we see throughout the book, I thought were phenomenal. And there is this sort of quiet beauty to this book that I haven't found in a lot of media. But these moments, the story's not so concerned with like action and fighting the bad guys. It's more concerned about, moving forward and helping out the survivors of like traumatic events and moving forward together. And there are so many moments in this book that stuck with me. The moment where she teaches Ruthie how to wash her hands, that was beautiful. There's no way to describe that moment without sounding like you're dissing the book. But it genuinely
really was
is
good.
It genuinely is a great moment.
Yeah.
The whole opening issue, the first issue, I think is perfect. Like that's
Perfect.
the one.
Whoa.
Like that's the one where I don't think it has like any issues. The first issue. After that, I see the issues kind of slip through. But I think it has a really strong opening. The backstory in Argo City, the leftover planet or the leftover city of Krypton, that was beautiful. Where she helps the gravedigger, that was awesome. And once again, the ending where, we learn or we realize, that forgiveness isn't something that is necessarily owed, that I think was beautiful. And yeah, I don't know. It was a powerful story for me. So that's why I give it an 8.5.
And I think like my biggest takeaway from Supergirl is that Superman would absolutely kick her ass in a fight, bro. I think absolutely Superman would absolutely destroy her. She's not very good at fighting, not compared to Superman, bro. Come on. Oh my gosh. She almost got killed by a bunch of like pirates. Oh.
Mind you, she's 21, inexperienced. She just recently landed on the planet, and she spent most of the time in red sun planets.
Yeah. I feel like that
and
would
a green
make
one,
her
and
stronger.
she lasted longer than Superman did in that planet.
Because she had a helper.
Specifically,
because she had like another person with her there, though.
Superman could only last 45 minutes there.
Because
the Justice League had to help him out.
No, because they didn't have to help him out. He had good friends in the Justice League who decided to swoop in and help their friend because friendship is key to victory. All right, guess what?
That's also
if
why
Supergirl was alone,
nobody
would have come to help Supergirl if it wasn't for Ruthie being there because she's alone, except for Comet, the hot horseman. So overall score here, combining everything we got, I gave it a 5.65 out of 10. I liked it a little more than I disliked it. I thought it was good, and I gave it a subjective rating of a paperback. I thought this was perfect. I wanted a physical form. Let me make that very clear. I would have hated to read this comic on an ebook because the art is just so beautiful, and I think we all deserve the luxury of flipping through a comic book. And I like that this is on my shelf. One day when I have kids, and I guess they're old enough to read this, I will be like, oh, go flip through this comic book. They can read comics and it's beautiful. Something that I don't think you can really get with an ebook. So I gave it a paperback. Now, Nor, if you're with us, if the storm hasn't taken you away, what is your overall score and your subjective rating?
I gave it a 7.85 out of 10, which is lower than it really should be.
Listen, I know I'm a history guy and I'm not too good at this whole math thing, but your scores go: character 8.5 out of 10, plot 8 out of 10, impact 8.5 out of 10, world 8.5 out of 10, and style 9 out of 10, and your overall score is a 7.85?
I think we messed up the formula somewhere. So that means that my score is actually more like an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah. Either way, I want to hear everybody's opinions in the comment section below. Is this a good comic or not? Tell me honestly. Now, I haven't read a whole lot of comics, so it could be like better than 90% of them, and just most comics are garbage. I don't know. I haven't read them. So let me know down below. But Nora, I can't see you because you're frozen, but I would love to know, did you finish your drink?
I did finish my drink.
That's excellent. I also finished my drink. I didn't chew the ice cube because that's super annoying during the podcast, but I finished my drink because here at Novels and Nightcaps, regardless of how good the comic is, we finish our drinks. Everybody have a good night.